We are pleased to welcome the South Jersey Radio Club to join us tonight. Dick Gall's K2GMY's radio club when he lived back east. We're going to have our presenter tonight, Dr. Bob Heil, K9EID, doing our presentation. Bob was a storied and legendary sound and radio engineer. He's done the sound for the Grateful Dead and The Who. A ham since he was a teenager, he's an accomplished theater organist, sound engineer, and inventor. In 1966, he founded Heil Sound. He's developed industry-standard microphones for music concerts, radio broadcasting, and ham gear. He's a member of many halls of fame. He has his equipment displayed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was the International Amateur Radio Operator of the Year in 1982. In May 2011, Bob became the host of a live weekly ham radio netcast, Ham Nation. In December 2014, Bob was awarded an honorary doctorate degree in music and technology from the University of Missouri. So without further ado, our presenter is Dr. Bob Heil. Welcome. We're glad you could join us this evening.
Well, I'm so happy to be here, and I have quite a connection with Benicia, and that we'll get into that in a while. But I think the best thing to do is just launch into this thing. We're going to go through a few things and talk about the science of audio. But before we do that, I got a little bit of history that we'll show you. I started this great hobby in 1956. One of my high school chums got me interested, so away I went. That Harvey Wells that you see sitting there is still with me. It's over here. Oh, gosh, it's underneath the 75A4, but anyway, it's still on the air in the mornings on my AM nets. And to the right, in 1959, by that time, I had 3 or 4 builds, but I shortly after I got on the circuit, I met up with a guy on the air about 2 weeks into it, and I heard the most terrible sound I'd ever heard. Now, this is 6 meters AM, 1956, right? There was no sideband on that, up on the upper frequencies. But I happened to hit a button on that SX99, and guess what? Whoa, he comes flying. I said, that's that sideband stuff. Well, come to find out, I had visited, I was playing the organ at the Fox Theater in 1955 through actually 67. But anyway, I would go into St. Louis and play that Monty Wurlitzer. We'd play 8 minutes, and then we had to watch the movie or whatever. Well, I had 2, sometimes 3 hours to kill. So I went down and visited my friend that I met on 6 meters. Come to find out, it was K0DGE. He was the chief engineer of CBS Radio, KMOX. Larry Burroughs took me under his wing as a 15-year-old kid and taught me how to solder, taught me how to build. And I asked him, I said, would you build me one of those 6-meter sideband rigs? Oh, he said, no, I can't do that. But I'll teach you how, and he did. So in 1958, I got out the soldering iron and put it together, and you can see that up over my head is the Central Electronics 20A. What we did is we took the 20-meter coils out of that, wound a 6-meter coil using the old good dip meter, and bingo, add 36 megs from an oscillator. What do you got? 50. And we went on and built other mixers, and we were on 2-meter sideband. I built that Johnson Thunderbolt. That was 1.5 kilowatts on 6 and 2 meters, and built that. But then a crazy thing happened. I had an invitation from Bob Drake. Called me in 1959. He said, you the guy that's got that kilowatt on sideband on 6 meters? And I said, yes, sir. He said, well, we'd like for you to come and visit our meeting. We do a meeting here once a year. It's a technical meeting. Would you like to come and tell us how you did that? Hey, I'm just a kid, man. I could tell them, but I felt really weird. But I'm talking to engineers, I guess. So a friend of mine had a Bonanza, and he said, hey, I've heard about that meeting. Let's go. So we flew to Dayton, Ohio, to the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Dayton. and they had taken all the furniture out of one of the floors. One room was the Collins room, the Hallicrafter room, the Drake room, the Mosley room, so on and so on. But what was so wonderful for this kid was these were like Hollywood stars to me, because I had been reading about them in my manuals and QST and CQ and all that. And here it was, the Dayton Hamvention. It started out, there were 600 people at that one. That'd been about the 4th year they had been doing that. They moved to Hera in 74. But while I was there, I had this Englishman come to me, and coming from a little town in southern Illinois, I was fascinated by his brogue and so on. And he said, we'd like to do an experiment with you. We build antennas, and he was with the J-Beam company. And hey, I thought this was cool because up until that time, all I was doing was experimenting. That was ham radio for me. And it's why I do all I can to continue that, to keep the building alive. And he sent the antenna over to Marissa, Illinois, where I lived, and that beam was 128 elements on 2 meters. I had the most loving parents in the world. I really did. They allowed me to put that up. I had friends that they were in the construction business, and they brought up a crane to put this thing up. It was about 50 foot high and 50 foot wide, actually. But what an experiment. And I could be here all night on that alone. NASA borrowed it. Yeah, NASA borrowed it. I was playing the organ in a restaurant from 1959 through 65. And it was a restaurant that was across the street from McDonnell Aircraft, where they were building the space capsule. And all the 7 astronauts would come there at least once a month or once every, all 7 of them. And they'd have dinner. They had listened to me play. That's what I did. I played dinner music or I had built a pipe organ to put in there. And I started telling him about ham radio. We'd talk about things. Alan Shepard he'd come and sit on the bench with me because his father had a pipe organ in their home. And he said, yeah, he'd wake me up every morning playing that stupid thing. So I'm very aware of what's going on. But anyway, that antenna was quite something in my career. But at the same time, along in 72, I put up a pair on a 110-foot roan. My folks allowed me to do this on another part of our property, and put a pair of Telerexes, and I'd heard about phasing antennas, and we're going to really get into this in a minute. You're really going to be glad that you're going to hear this, because you don't hear this kind of stuff. We're going to really get into phasing. I had a 220 antenna and all the other stuff, but man, it was great. But that's how it all started for me. And the really interesting thing about the organ, it had about 4,000 pipes in it from 1 inch out to a 32 foot. And it hadn't been played much in 20 years. So I, along with the regular organist there, he taught me how to actually listen. See, everybody hears. Few people listen. What's the difference? Listening is a mental concept, a mental process. You go in and dissect what you hear, all of the harmonics. If there is distortion, is it low, high? And it fascinated me, and it's how I learned to do things. And it guided me in several careers. Well, I got tired of playing. I had played 12 years, 6 nights a week from the age of 14 all the way out. And I got into building speakers, big speakers. The picture at the top, you see the 2 guys standing on side of it. They were roadies for me. Those big speakers, you can see how big they are. They came from the Fox Theater. They were throwing them out. This was somewhere along about 65, 66. And I said, well, can I have those? They were out in the alley. He said, well, sure. hams don't throw anything away. I didn't think we did. And I started building this sound system, just playing around. And the next thing you know, I had been called to bring it to some of the arenas and stuff or whatever. And so I did. I took it to the Heil Auditorium in St. Louis. And there were all kinds of people there, Dolly Parton and little Jimmy Dickens, mostly country acts. But boy, we had a fun time. But then one of the managers said to me, "Hey, you ever take that thing on tour?" And I said, no, I don't know if I could do that. He said, "Well, we've got this little band that's going to start up in Ohio, and we really need to see if we could use some of that sound system." So my roadie's going, "Yeah, let's go." We go to Ohio for this little tour, and who it was? It was WB6ACU, Joe Walsh and the James Gang. Here's a picture of he and I where we're always fiddling with amplifiers or something. And right beside him is Peter Frampton, and that's the story that's really encapsulated Benicia. We'll get back to that in a minute. But Joe and I, we did a lot of fun things, building things and making things happen. And of course, it was all amateur radio. But we gained quite a reputation because the Fox called me one night and said, "You still got those speakers?" I said, "Yes, why?" "Well, the band came in here tonight and they don't have any. They got confiscated by the drug agents in New Orleans last night. And we really need a PA." They came on, they didn't know, they didn't have cell phones in those days. It was the Grateful Dead. It's a piece of rock and roll history. You can look it up and find out. You put the night rock and roll sound was born, and that happened at the Fox Theater in St. Louis in 1970. And we really had a great time. We fell in love with each other because I was not only listening to them, but I could do stuff. And that was always the problem in that period. They'd try to get engineers to help them, but the engineers, they don't want to hear about it. You bunch of them rock and roll, I don't want to hear about it. Well, hey, I didn't care what they were doing. I have never smoked a cigarette. I have never tasted beer. And for gosh sake, never did the drugs to this day. And so we had a great relationship all through the years. But from there, we hit the front page of Billboard, and everybody was after me. Along the way, Joe and I came up with this concept of playing the speakers of the guitar, not through a speaker, but through a hose. Put it in your mouth, and by golly, the guitar would sound like it was you were talking guitar. It was a talking guitar. We called it the talk box. And this was quite fascinating. That is a neat thing. A guy sent that to me not long ago. It was an original one, 1970. Oh, I think it was 73. It was in the shipping box that he's got it from our plant. So away we went. Joe and I were doing crazy things like that. But then came an interesting story. I had done, in 73, we'd done most all of the tours that Humble Pie had done. And their lead guitarist was Peter Frampton. Well, they pulled him out in 1974 and made a solo act out of him. And as it would be in those days, a lot of those guys would come over to America, and they either had to work to get a green card, get married, or go back home. Well, his little sweetheart, Penny McCall, they were married in my home in Marissa, Illinois. That was quite something in 1973. But a year later, she called me and she says, "You have to send me a Christmas present for Peter. Don't send him guitars. He's got lots of them. So what did I do? I sent him a talk box, and it really has almost made his career. He'll tell you that. So we had a really great time in the early days, just experimenting and having fun. Some of the greatest groups in the world, the Grateful Dead, Dolly Parton, The Who. I was with The Who for 6 years. Les Paul. The list is long, but just a few of those that we did work with, and we're still working with some of them that are still going, because now, of course, we're building microphones. But here's a little trivia for all of you. I want to know who that group is. That was their first tour that we did for them. Their manager called me up and said, I got this little band, and they're really loud, so we need that big PA. And that was some park in St. Louis. You won't guess it. That is ZZ Top without beards. They were just a crazy guy, and they're still wonderful friends of mine. Billy Gibbons is so well read. He's so knowledgeable, and we got together with all these guys because of the fact that I helped them, and I wasn't there to drink booze or to have a big party. I was there to help them, and we remain that today. And only thing today is we're building microphones, and we'll get into that. Now I want to get into the real trucks of this whole thing. Shortly after 72, after we hit the front page of Billboard, and the whole world knew about Heil Sound in Marissa, Illinois, 50 miles southeast of St. Louis. And I get this call one day, and he said, "That you, Heil?" And I said, "Yes, sir. Who's this?" "That's the Clips here." I'm going, this is God on the other end of this phone. This is the audio God, Paul Clips. He invented the folded horn, and really by all that he did, he was the father of the hi-fi movement, because he built some really great things. And Paul come to visit me that next day, and I figured, oh, he's going to cut me off at the knees. He didn't at all. He changed my life all day. It's like he's about 6'6" or 7. I'm a little bitty short guy, and all day. "Why did you do that?" "Well, how come you did this?" "Well, I don't know. I did it." "Well, how come?" And he was just learning things, and I learned the next day he'd never heard loud rock and roll music. He wouldn't allow it in his presence. His plant manager told me that. And it was something that I couldn't recreate, that whole sequence of Paul Clips coming to visit me. Because what Paul Clips did to me in 1972, he turned me into what had happened in the 1920s. And he guided me to the studies of Bell Labs. And Bell Labs was referred to as the idea factory in the 20s. They were the consolidation of AT&T and Western Electric. And Western Electric was the manufacturing arm of the Bell system. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. There were 4,000 scientists and engineers assigned to this newly created Bell Telephone Labs, fully dedicated to researching how our ears worked and what frequencies were most important to understand the spoken word. And that's why I say to you, listening is such a mental art. Listening. And Paul Clips, he really, really got me going. I barely got out of high school, and all of a sudden I'm really learning great stuff. Bell Labs, they did that study of speech intelligence. And there are 4 things that they say affects it. Room reverb, if the room is all real echoey, frequency response of that audio, how loud the sound pressure, and what about distortion? And then the pattern is so important, no matter what it is. But if it's a speaker or a microphone or whatever. But here's the deal. I use antenna arrays to create a directional pattern. A Yagi, phased arrays, loops. And I had been doing that in the ham radio world 20 years before that. And so we build microphones and design elements to create a similar directional pattern. Why? We want to improve human speech articulation. And many of you might never have heard of speech articulation. Well, we're gonna do something here. I'm gonna pull around over here, and I should put a camera on this sometime. I have a little mixer here, and what I'm going to do, I'm gonna do this for you. The telephone company, when they first started things rocking and rolling, they couldn't figure out why they couldn't understand each other from New York to California. It was very hard to understand. And what they discovered was it was distorted, but there was no articulation. How do you get that? So what happened there was Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson, they looked at this whole thing saying, wait a minute, this is all flat response, right? It is. Oh, well, it's got to sound good if it's flat. No, why not? Well, let me get this back to where you can understand. Listen how clear things got when I just turned one knob. I'll come back into a minute which one it was. And it sure wasn't a volume control. Flat response is not your friend. Here's the reason. Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson were put on the case after the first telephone system didn't work. They determined the problem was not the system. The problem was our ears. We don't hear flat. Yeah, I hear guys, oh, I hear flat. I got great ears. I got ears. No, you don't. There is a chart of a human ear. All of us hear like that. If you get up to around 100 dB, it's kind of flat. So that's why kids like to listen to things real loud. Because they can hear all the cymbals, all the mid-range vocals, all the bass guitar. But when they get down to 20, 30, in normal room, look how much is lost. It looks like a ride at Disneyland. And it's just really weird because the human ear has to have that mid-range because it needs articulation. Articulation is so important. In amateur radio, a lot of guys will say, well, boy, I'm going to get this big thing here and I'm going to put a lot of low end in it. And all I do is turn up the lows. But when I did, it masked the mid-range. Well, what happened? Let me get it back here so you can understand me. All I did was take the low end out. You see, what Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson learned, that everything from about 2K to 3K, that's the articulation path. That's the path that we have to really push on to understand the difference of an F and an S, a P and a B. That's how it's done. If we don't have that mid-range, you heard what happens when I get rid of it. And so when we're looking at amateur radio audio, too many lows just make it way too difficult to understand. And it covers up all of those important mids. And you can see that most of the transmitters are between 2.4 and 2.9. There is where you want to put all of your RF power. Well, how are you going to do that? You're going to do that by equalizing the transmitter or a microphone that does it for you. I came back to radio after about 12 years, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What happened to my great Art Collins audio? Holy smokes. I mean, all those years I was on the road, I never had any radios around me. So when I come back home, I started playing around, and whoa, what happened to this audio? I heard this guy one night on the air, and he sounded something like this. And I said, what kind of radio is this? What kind of transmitter? Well, hey, there's a Kenwood. Really? Yeah, that's a Kenwood. Got a matching microphone. Really? What happened to your articulation? Well, I got my gain turned up. I didn't ask you that. What happened to your articulation? He didn't know what I was talking about. Even today, a lot of them don't. That's why I'm here. So what did I do? Let me get my mids turned back on here. What did I do? I took part of a mixer that we had built for the sound enforcement stuff. I built a little equalizer, a 2-band equalizer, bass and treble. I wrote an article, and it appeared in a QST 1982. I got the cover award. That I never knew there was a cover award. It got thousands and thousands of reviews, letters, faxes, email. Really wasn't happening. I didn't know what I was doing. My phone was ringing all the time. My plant was closed. We never decided what we were going to do with it. I quit building speakers and amplifiers for the rock and roll market. And so we opened the plant again. And because I really wanted it to do it just so that we could help people build things. Well, that didn't work. So they wanted us to build it. So I did. We came back to doing things with the equalizer. What's even crazier about it, in 1999 or so, I get this letter, and it's from Dr. Inouye of ICOM. And he had a picture of his rig. It was remember the 781? It was a great transceiver. Had the first one that had a screen on it. And he had my Gold Line microphone and one of these. And he was telling me how wonderful it was. He was thinking about building a new line of radios, and I think we should have your equalizer in it. So if you own an ICOM Pro 1, Pro 2, Pro 3, all the way to the 7610, you got a Heil equalizer built in, bass, treble. A couple of years later at Dayton, Dr. Hasegawa came to me. We need to do it better. So I did a parametric EQ for them. But I told them, you're going to have trouble. What be the trouble? Education. Why? Well, you see, bass and treble, I selected the frequencies. This baby is sitting, the low side is sitting at 160 hertz, plus or minus. I can boost it, I can reduce it. The other one is sitting at 3K, plus or minus, because we want to encompass that 2 to 3K. And you don't have to worry about it. I've already done that. Thank you very much, Paul Klipsch, for telling me where to put it. But the parametric is different. And I swear, there is so much to talk about in these nights. I could spend an hour just on parametric EQ. It is so important. It doesn't have 2 knobs. It has 9 knobs, 9 controls. Why? There are 3 filters. There's where the 9 comes from. One of the knobs, the controls, you set the frequency. So let's set that first one at 160. And the next one is either plus or minus. So we want to minus it. We want to get rid of that low end. And what's the next one? It's bandwidth. How far do you want this 160 to reach? 1 octave or 2 octaves? I just usually do it in an octave and I'm happy. Well, you do it the second one. There's a funky sound that always happens around 600 to 800 cycles. It's funky. That's all I can say. I can spot it a mile away when I hear it. And almost like talking into a tin can. So you take the second one, you put that at 700, 800 cycles, notch it a little bit, 1 octave. What do you do with the next one? You already know, don't you? You put it at 2.5K, crank that mama up, and 1 octave, and crank it up all you can. Because if you don't, this is a parametric EQ in here. I need to put a camera on this when I do these. If I take it out, you see what happens. I'm going to bring it back there. That's around 400. When I bring it up to 2.5K, listen what happens. It's very articulate. And that's what we're trying to do, is we want to make things articulate. And in doing that, you want to be able to know how to use a microphone. A lot of people don't know how to use a microphone. First of all, you cannot be 2 feet away. I don't even like desk stands. Why? Because this is what happens. So you can see what I'm doing here. If that was on a desk stand, that's what you hear. Well, you're stupid, Heil. Just turn up the gain. Okay, I will. I'll turn it up. Okay, there. Now what do you hear? You hear this room. And this is a studio I built for the pipe organ, the theater organ here, and it's really kind of nice. But you take other shacks, and I hear them. They sound like bathrooms. They're all echoey. Now you'll notice and listen closely as I get back into the microphone. I always use a pop filter so I don't pop my peas. Listen how much richer it sounds. You know why? It's pretty simple. Every time you double the distance, you'll lose 6 dB. You know how loud 6 dB is? You're going to hear, I got an incredible demo here in just a little. But doesn't it sound so much better? We didn't lose our transient response. We didn't lose any dynamic range. And just turning the gain up, that isn't the answer. The answer is to use the microphone properly and adjust your equalization, and away you go. But you definitely don't want to forget the windscreen. But one of the major things that I wanted to do is I wanted to build a microphone that really laid on the rear rejection. Because Joe had asked me to build him a microphone in 2006 for a stage. He says, I need one that I don't have to just move around and all. I just stay right in front of. I want to be able to go side to side. And I don't want to hear anything behind me. How do you do that? How would one do that? It's pretty simple. Well, all of you have the answer. You have the answer on top of your roof. Yeah. And when I tell engineers because they always ask me, "Oh, where did you go to school?" I didn't. I barely got out of high school. I was too busy playing the theater organ. Well, yeah, but where'd you learn all this? I learned it from ham radio. No. Where did you learn it? I said, ham radio. And this is one of the things that ham radio taught me. And I constantly share it with all of you because you are never going to forget the next 5 minutes. Never. So if you're kind of like laying in the back, not paying a lot of attention, maybe some of this is very boring, I'm going to unplug this microphone. I have a Y cable. Simple Y cable. I am not playing games. And that Y cable is just what I said. It lets me have 2 microphones on 1 cable. Now, one thing about this, which is kind of interesting, because I put those together, the gain goes down just a tad. Didn't touch the EQ. Both of them are the same, PR22s. They sound alike, different colors. If you had a 500 watt amplifier and you weren't making it in the pileups, so you go out and buy a kilowatt. Oh, yeah. What does it cost you? A couple $1,000? Maybe. You know how much gain if you went from 500 to 1,000? How much gain do you have? 3 dB. You can't argue this is science, folks. 3 dB, huh? Okay. Do you know how loud 3 dB is? Do you know? You probably don't, but you're about to hear it. When I bring this microphone up to here, the meter on my console is going to go up 3 dB. I keep saying I need to put a camera on. Here we go. I'm going to talk into both of them. They're both the same. Here we go. It's going to get pretty loud, of course, because it's a couple $1,000. 1, 2, 3. What? Remember what I said about listening? Do this for me. Close your eyes, please. Each of you are going to really mentally dive into this when I take 3 dB away. 1, 2, 3. It can't be told. I'm going to do it again. 1, 2, 3. It is just the same. Why? Because the human being cannot detect 3 decibel unless you're in an echo chamber and a very scientific room. But most of our ham shacks, even as well as I built this one, no. Man, let me tell you what to do. Okay. You haven't seen the best part of this yet, but I'm just going to give you guys a little hint. Take that couple of thou. Learn how to equalize your transmitter. We'll get into that later. But take that couple of $1,000 and give it to your wife so she can go buy some shoes and purses. Man, it'll do more than any kilowatt amplifier you can bring home. I'm telling you, it's the truth. I know. I know I'm a crazy guy, but that's okay. I have this magic little plug. This is what I said you're never going to forget, ever. And it means everything. Why are we not seeing this? Why isn't this the second question on our test? Well, that's all nonsense that we have to go through to get our test. Well, I don't understand it. That plug, pin 3 hooked to 2 and 3 to 2, is out of phase. Well, what does that mean? That still works and sounds the same. Yeah. Not when we put them together. Nothing. I'm screaming. I'm not kidding you. They're there. Not even it's out of phase. Now, how many hours do we have? It is my It is my very favorite subject because it affects everything you do. Notice how the mid-range came up on me. How come I didn't touch anything? Because some years back, I was asked to build a microphone that didn't need any equalization. Paul Rogers of Bad Company. He said, every time I go out, I have a different sound guy. They don't know what I'm doing. Build me a microphone. I just tell them, leave it flat. This has a very nice rise between 2 and 3K. All of my microphones for ham radio does. Why? Because I want that articulation. And so one of those things. Okay, back to what I'm talking about. You take any kind of dynamic microphone. I don't care whose it is. I don't care what you paid for it. I don't care who's using it on stage. Every one of them, you see, they got to be right here. Don't get over here. Oh, no. You got to be right here. And it has no rear rejection. Huh. Joe Walsh. God bless you, Joe. One of my good buds. He said, I want you to build a microphone that I can move around. I don't have to be stuck in front of it. I want to be able to move all around. I don't want to be stuck. Build it. You can do it. But he said, you remember that big antenna you had up? I'd come through town in the bus. You turned that around, I couldn't hear you. Why? Because it had fantastic front to back ratio. Huh. How'd that work? You just experienced it. Phasing. That reflector on a Yagi is out of phase. And you can get 10, 15 dB of rear rejection. Why can't I do that to my microphone? Sure, Electro Voice and Neumann, none of those guys couldn't. They're $1 million engineers. I just used antenna theory. You ready for this? Another moment you're not going to forget. When I turn this microphone around, it's going to be 40 decibel down. Yep, 40. Oh, it still works. But it's 40 dB down. It's all about phasing. My favorite subject. I love phasing. I love it. It is a big part of ham radio. A big part. But nobody ever talks about it. How does it work? Well, it's very simple. Just two signals out of phase. How does a carrier deleted? When Wes Shum built the first sideband transmitter, by the way, another piece of history, it wasn't Art Collins. It was Wes Shum in 1954 that brought single sideband to ham radio. How did he get rid of the other sideband? It's out of phase. When you hear some idiot pile up on top of the station you're listening and you want to get rid of him, how does your notch filter work? He's out of phase. We've talked about the Yagi, noise canceling headphones. How does it work? Has another little microphone in front of the speaker, out of phase. It affects the equalization filters. It is amazing, all of the things that phasing does. I'm going to do something that takes about 2 minutes, I think 3. I had a home down in the Ozarks for a while. Just a second home. Sarah and I would go down, spend the weekend, and I built a phased array. I always wanted to build a phased array. And you hear that, oh my God, you're talking about $1 million and all kind. No, I think it cost me all $20. We'll explain. All you need is 2 dipoles. I assume you have those. Some coax, but that phasing plug. Check this out. We have just completed the installation of a 75-meter phased array antenna system consisting of a pair of coaxial dipoles mounted atop a pair of 55-foot telephone poles. We put them in an inverted V fashion, and the poles are 64 foot apart. These are 500 foot from the operating position, fed with RG-213. In order to make the antennas directly from east to west, we use a delay line, a 43 foot here on 75 meters that's switched in and out of the driven element, either east or west. The downlead length is 126 foot. We take all of that coax, the downlead length, the 43 foot phasing delay line, and mounted them in a container, one of the plastic container boxes that we actually buried, and just the top of it shows. It's all sealed, so it's waterproof. But that's the way we get to switch all the components from 500 foot using one of the Amatron RCS 8V remote switches. It really works well. Take a listen to how we can get at least 10 to 20 dB difference east to west.
Like a lot of people do, mine's usually 3 inches or so. That's just after I get done mowing it. And I know, probably, we get a dry day. I'm going to have to be out there and mow. That's just all there is to it, because, if you leave it that high, when it starts growing in it all, it gets looking ragged pretty quick. So, it's to that point now, and
the system really performs on weak signals. Take a listen as we switch to the direction they're coming from. Also note the preamplifier makes no difference on 75 meters on this signal. The preamp will, of course, make the meter read higher, but in many cases, the preamplifier does not cause the weak signal to be more readable. Check it out.
I don't know if that is their form of portable, or what that is. Your wire that hooked up to your computer, and then did you use your handheld to go through it?
Here's some great sounding AM stations, and we were getting about 20 dB front to back.
When the leaves drop off, I'll start using it. Daryl, purchasing digital audio recorder. I need to do that too. That'd be nice to have. And I was going to mention to you too about your pictures with Fifi. I had sent that out to a few friends, and one of my cousins that was.
Well, we were talking about you yesterday with Brian. Brian, the thought was that you could locate that remote receiver out at Brian's QTH. And, of course, by the way, if you have it out at Brian's QTH, you could use the internet.
And 1.0 VUW, well, I'm going to need to go up on the hill and swing that log around to the west. Because you guys were off the back, apparently. I thought, I just didn't think about which direction anybody would be. So.
Great performance from just a couple of pieces of wire. You can do this. It's very simple. You need just 3 things. Of course, you need the antennas, but you need the delay line, you need the remote switch, and of course then the downlead links. The RCS 8V from Ameritron makes it so easy. But the delay lines are important. They have to be exactly 43 foot on 75, 22.6 on 40, and 11.4 feet on 20 meters. The downlead links, both of them have to be exactly the same length, and all of that can be coiled up and put in that container box that you bury. Keep in mind, you can do this with regular wire dipoles. Just make sure they're exactly the same height and the spacing is correct. Have fun with this great technology of phased arrays.
We can't hear.
We lost your sound, Bob.
Hey, there we go. Got a couple of things I want to do before we get out of here. I want to go back to the microphone and show you how I did the PR40 or any of ours. Again, we had to make sure that when we did this, we could get really good rejection. Well, you go look at any microphone today, take it apart, and you'll decide that it has 4 little holes. 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, that's it. That's what they want for rear rejection. These are $1 million engineers, by the way. Well, I said, no, we need more. So what I did, we opened up the whole bottom of the element. And another thing that we did, we're the first company to build a large dynamic that worked. Shure tried it years ago and failed. This is an 1.5 inch dynamic. And I opened the whole bottom of it, not the little holes on the side. And then I set it up on top of what I call a signal collection tube. And that's why it has the panels on the side. There's a lot of side address condensers. Don't get me started on condensers. They're a scourge of the earth. I just wish we could erase all of them. And we could get into that some night and prove why I'm saying that. Talk about rejection, don't have any. So anyway, we built this so that the side up through the different frequencies come up through the signal collection tube in the bottom, and it's 360 around, and you heard what happens. I mean, we get tremendous rear rejection from that. And it also makes things sound a little better too when you don't have all that phasey problem from the back. It's gone. So I hear it a lot with microphones. They get real kind of a hollow type sound, and that's because they've got some phase distortion. The back signal is coming around and coming into the front, but they're out of phase. So it's just one of those things that there's so much that we need to learn and do, and it's where it's why I spend so much time with clubs trying to share some of this. And I got a whole thing on how to operate your receiver. That's one of the things that really bugs me, is that the manufacturers, they really don't know. They don't. The engineers aren't hams usually. And here's something. Check this out.
New application, and it works great, so that's very good. I love the technical abilities that come along with this.
There it is on Fast AGC.
The technician class was truly a technician class test. And
put it on slow.
Very good comment.
All that background noise is gone, and you always want to turn the RF gain down.
Moving right along here.
Look, there's no signal, but he's louder. How can that work? How can that work? How can you have less signal? And it's all about signal to noise ratio. And we don't hear about that. And I could be here all night talking about this. It's my favorite subject, all these things. And if you really get into it and try to learn what your receiver does, you can do a lot more. And one thing about things I want to point out too, ICOM has a real situation. It's not trouble. It's not a problem, because they build fantastic radios. If you haven't played with the 7610, you should do it. Anyway, from day one, back in the 60s, all of their transceivers had, the first ones had no mic preamp. They put a little transistor inside the microphone. And of course, hand mics are stupid anyway, because they all sound like this. Oh, Heil, mine don't sound like that. Oh, yes, it does. Whenever you put an element in a clamshell, that's what you get. Well, I should bring my hand. We built a great hand mic. I opened up the top, and it doesn't sound like a hollow. No. So anyway, what happens is they came along later with the 730, 740, anything with a zero. They had no preamp in them, a real low gain. You had to use their microphone. Then came the 735 and beyond, but the microphone preamp was still 10 dB down. So when I was working with Dr. Inouye, he said, you need to build me a better microphone. And so we did. And we came up, because there's a lot of electrodes, but most of them are cheap little Chinese junkers. And we came up with our own, and it really, really plays. This is what we call the ICM, almost spells ICOM. And it really works great because it's got tons of gain output. You don't have to have a preamplifier. It's all done in the microphone. Comes with a cable and a connector. You can't use it on a Kenwood. It only works on ICOM, but boy, does it work. And then we have that same element that we put in headsets. And not only just that type of headset, but the big dog. And if any of you have been aware of the past decade, Heil, well, really ours goes back in 1984 when we built the first headset for ham radio for the North California DX Club. But it's grown to this. This is the king right here. There's a lot of people tried to copy it, but sorry, they're wrong. Go play with your automobiles. This thing is really wonderful. A lot of Paul clips in it. He taught me how to tune a speaker to a cavity. You take it outside in free air, figure out what the cone resonance is, then you treat, or you build or treat the enclosure to meet that. So there's no distortion, no phase distortion, and the speakers are great. The other thing, and the people with the hearing aids love it, because the speaker is sitting back about here. Look how far away it is from your ear, so you don't have it slapped up against your head like all other headphones. And it is just a marvelous piece. You can go left to right if you have a hearing imbalance, or what's that say? Phase reversal. What in the world would you do with phase reversal? What is that? What happens? Thank you again, Paul Clips. You go into a pileup and you hear this little weakie back here. Reverse the phase and he comes up front. You can move signals in your head acoustically. And it's an amazing thing. There's just so many things we can talk about with that, but it gives you a little insight of what's going on in our stuff. And we're very blessed. We're very blessed that we lead the pack when it comes to the equipment, and it's because it's like nobody else is doing this kind of stuff, and we're happy to bring it to you. I have to tell you one more thing before we even think about going, and that has to do with Benicia. What's the connection with Benicia and Bob Heil? Does anybody know? Well, you should, because it all has to do with this thing, the talk box. I started building those in '74 after Frampton came out and did his big album in '76. Oh my gosh. Anyway, in I think it was 88, somewhere along there. I attended a party for Jim Dunlop. Jim and I had been friends, manufacturing friends at different shows. And he bought a bunch of old pieces. Jimi Hendrix owns the patent. Can you believe this? He bought the patent for the fuzz face. Well, if Jimi Hendrix didn't have a fuzz face, he wouldn't have a sound. And so he bought that. And of course, he's passed on. There's several others they passed on. Jim Dunlop went and bought those patents, and so he brought back many of the old 1960s and 70s sounds. And we were at a party of his because Steve Mortensen, he was cousin to my ex-wife. And so we were invited to this party, and they thought, well, you should come because Jim Dunlop's going to be there. So we did. Only thing is, we didn't do much at the party, and we were sitting in the back talking and working a deal. And he bought the rights to the Heil talk box. And since then, the Heil talk box is built in Benicia. So there's your connection of Bob Heil. I think we get a couple of bucks. No big deal. But anyway, we're so thrilled that Jim did that because it needed to be, the flame needed to keep burning. And I was totally out of that business. And we got into home theater and the satellite business, all that stuff, and then hit into the ham radio. So the last thing I did for all of us is I created a new connector. I hate the connectors. You know what I'm talking about. They are Chinese garbage. They started in the CB world in the 60s, and they're just awful. The cable clamps were not made for any specific thing, so you wrap tape around it so you hope they don't pull out. Well, you'll notice the ring on that is very, very wide. It's not a little thin thing that you have to have needle nose to tighten it down. For clumsy fingers like mine, you make that work. And it has two outlets. One of them is exactly what our wire is, so you don't have to have cable black tape around it. And you clamp that down, you can pull your car with that thing. It will not come out. The other one is a push-to-talk line that comes out, and you can plug one of our foot switches into it. I made my own wire. I got ticked off about that. What kind of junk is this stuff? You know what I'm talking about? Cut the wire. Look into wire in your ICOM, Kenwood. I don't care what it is. It's junk. This stuff is amazing. First of all, it's 18 gauge, not 24. A pair inside a 100% silver shield. And when you peel it all away, you're not going to end up with 3 strands. It's beautiful as solder. But then, pay attention. What's going on here? We got two black, the black and whites inside that shield, but the red and the blue are not. Why? Oh, it's real simple. It's real simple, but nobody ever did anything about it. I have fixed more RFI problems just by changing mic cable. Push-to-talk lines are DC. Audio is AC. When you put those inside a shield, and much to maybe you would disagree, but you'd be wrong, few of the radios ground their shield. They float. You got to be kidding me. No, I'm not. And so we really want to keep that RF where it should be and not on that sensitive audio line. So that's the only thing in there. And then the DC line, let it do what it wanted. And it works great. It works great. And we make all of our connectors, and we sell thousands of feet of this each month to different manufacturers in the audio world. Julius Jones, W2IHY, he uses our connectors and our wire. Check it out. It's really something cool. I'm very proud of some of these things because they just haven't been done. They just haven't been done. And I'm here every day, many, many hours awake into the night trying to do this. And if I'm not doing that, I'm doing that. That's right around the corner. I'm looking at it. I do a show on WTWW every Saturday night at 7 o'clock. And we play a theater organ from the Arch of downtown St. Louis. We're about 12 miles straight east of the Arch. And I love to play. Been playing now for many, many years. Started when I was 12 in 1952. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be 80. It's kind of crazy. I look like I'm 50 and act like I'm 12, but I don't care. I still climb 100-foot towers. That's okay, buddy. I can make it happen. But we're doing our thing with Ham Nation. I hope you all are watching Ham Nation. It's a wonderful program. We're very excited about. It's grown so much in the past years. So you want to check it out. It's on Wednesday night, 8 o'clock Central. Just put Google into Ham Nation into Google, and Joe Walsh plays the theme every night. So you can make all that happen. And to close, I had quite an honor here a couple of years ago. I got a doctorate for music and electronics from Missouri U. I'm very honored and blessed by that. But man, again, I barely made it through high school. But I learned things from ham radio, and that's why I'm here. I need to turn this on to you guys and gals. There's so much to learn, and I don't read it. I don't hear it. And the latest thing that I did was our parametric EQ, and man, I wish we had all kinds of time tonight. But maybe I should come back some night, and we need to talk about this little guy, because it's an amazing thing when you get into trying to listen to audio.
It's the call sign.
Some of this stuff. Let me set this up. Here it is, flat the way you hear it. Well, now I quit talking. Of course he would. Oh, we'll go find somebody else. Let's do this guy right here.
I'm only 75 years old.
There we go.
I don't.
Remember what I said about equalization and speech articulation? Listen to this.
Quite a higher find help to get it done over.
It's not just louder. There's that guy in the noise. There's what you hear. And there's 2 headphone amps, so you can have a left or a right or whatever, record out. It's an amazing product, and I'm so proud of it. The speaker's amazing, but yeah, check it out. Well, I'm going to head down the road here because I still have to record an organ program yet tonight for Saturday. Any questions? Everybody probably wore out or went to sleep, but if you have any questions, I'm here for you.
I have a question for you. I guess you have a bunch of YouTube videos that cover all of this stuff, so I can learn how to do all that.
But everybody says I should do that, and I really need to do that. There are a few things up there. We've done a lot of things with the stuff on Ham Nation, but there are things. But I also I didn't ever bring it here. You want to get a hold of my book? It's the Ham Radio Handbook. It's a blue book, $15, I think it is. Most all of stores have it. The Heil Ham Radio Handbook. It's really good.
Yes. I
didn't write it. I compiled it. It's stuff that all of these guys, Larry Burrows from KMOX, Paul Klipsch, all of these guys that I learned from, it's their stuff. I just put it together. And a lot of good stuff in it, so check it out.
Question?
Go ahead, question.
Yeah, Bob, not a technical question. What years did you tour with the Grateful Dead?
1970 and through 71, and we hit the front page of Billboard magazine about it because it was quite a deal in the music industry that they got their sound man was put in jail, and that was the end of that, and they were going to be done for a while until I came along. But in the beginning of 71, I had to say so long because I got a call from the Who, and it was quite a contract, and I took it, and I was there for 6 years with the Who, built the Quadrophenia console. In fact, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that stuff is all there. Well, pieces of it. The mixer, it was the first quad mixer that had been built. I don't know if there's ever been another. And the speaker behind me was one of 6, the white one, for one of the rear channel speakers. We were building our own amplifiers, all kinds of stuff. But I just decided to do that because the Grateful Dead, they were absolutely wonderful, but they didn't do a lot of things. They just little spurt things, whereas the Who was a big contract. But boy, Jerry Garcia and I were best of friends. He'd come to Marissa and spend a day with me just talking stuff. And people, they thought they knew who he was, but they're expecting Jerry Garcia to be some laid out drug addict. No, he was on it technically. And so we always had a lot of fun with them. Great fun.
Thank you.
Anybody else have some questions for Bob?
Not a question, but a statement. I've spent many years in videotape and post-production as an editor. And some of the stuff that you talked about, I have been fighting with over many years when I'm sweetening audio. Phase, microphone phase, EQ, parametric equalizers, reverb, the whole 9 yards. But this was a fascinating talk for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if we just have more time, there's so much to talk about, and I think you would agree, but I just try to lump it together, and then what happens is we'll pick out something, and we'll come back and do some others, but we'll focus on one thing, and that really plays for me, and I can help you there. But I understand what you say. I don't go to concerts ever. I can't stand it. They're way too loud, way too bassy, and I can't understand the words. So there, and you probably agree to that.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Bob, a few years back on a Ham Nation episode, you had mentioned a Bell Labs report to read, and I've lost touch with that. I did print it out and read some. It was very interesting. Could you reference that again for us?
Well, you just go to Google and put Bell Labs in it, and there's just all kinds of things. Fletcher Munson, Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson, they were the guys. Once this stuff failed when they were building the phone system, they didn't know what they were going to do. They go, what can we do? What's wrong? So they put Dr. Fletcher and Munson on the case. What was wrong? This thing right here. This thing, because everybody assumed we all hear flat. We don't hear anywhere close to flat. So you have to make sure that what you're trying to perceive to people that can be equalized. And yet I get guys all the time, I don't need no darn equalizer. Everything you hear is equalized. Your car radio, your television, it might not have bass and treble on it, but they've all had little rise from 2 to 3K. Everything. And so, yes, we need equalization. And I applaud Dr. Inouye for seeing that and knowing that and having me help him put equalization into ham radio, because we brought it to you. And then Dr. Hasegawa wanted to do it better. So now I think every radio built's got an equalizer in it, all because Dr. Inouye thought should happen after he had gotten one of these little guys, put it together, and he discovered how important equalization is. The problem we have is a lot of guys, radios have a lot of it, and they get crazy with it and make it sound like a tub. Or then you get the guys that want to do 31 bands of EQ. Really? We're only 3K wide. What are you going to do with 31 bands when you only need 2 or 3? Nobody can ever answer that. It's just, well, it's just a lot better. No, only about 3 bands. The gentleman, the audio engineer will probably agree with me. You can have all you want, but for what we're doing on ham radio, you're only going to have about 3 or 4 sliders at work. Try to explain that to them, no. But you go through and look up Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Munson of Bell Labs, and you will have pages of things. I hope that would help.
Bob, this is Dick, K9EID. It's always a pleasure to hear your voice.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to bring all this science to you. I love it. Now we have a great platform to do it. Isn't this great? Man, I used to have to fly around the country, but of course that stopped. And it didn't stop because of COVID. It stopped some years back because it cost me $1,000 to fly to California from here. But now it's freebies. But look at all of the knowledge that we can all share. How cool is that?
Sure can see your enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, I mean, hey, I told you I'm going to be 80 in a couple of weeks. I never lose it.
And tubes roll too, right, Bob?
Oh my gosh, do they ever? Whole bunches of them over there. That's my morning AM stuff. My 20A I built in 1958. Mosley receiver I got from Carl Mosley that John Clemens built. There's a whole history. I'll come back some night and tell you about the history that's on there. And you can't see the best thing. That's my Harvey Wells down there. It's all working. It all works great. And I use it every day. Oh, don't forget. The Sixer. How many guys had a Sixer? Yeah. A 6-meter guy.
A tour.
Yeah. But didn't we have fun? We did. We had fun. But we learned a lot. That's the best part.
Well, Bob, I'm going to thank you very much for being our presenter tonight. I really enjoyed it. I've learned some stuff. I'm going to do a little more research and figure out so I can make it so I can hear it, just like you told us.
Well, the next thing is, if you have any problem, don't be shy. Send me an email. We'll get on Skype and talk together. I love sharing all this with everybody. So just holler at me and we'll make it all happen.
Well, I hope I started out right. I have one of your PR40s for my HF rig, and I use your Pro 7 when I do emergency stuff, so I can hear what's going on.
Nothing Pro 7. I just can't tell you how wonderful that product has turned out to be, and we're blessed that I was able to come up with it.
I can wear it all day long and talk on the radio to people because I'm doing that.
Oh, you know what? There's something that I always forget there's so much I forget. I'll read an EHAM once in a while. I read every day EHAM reviews. Somebody says, that Heil headset, it just reads in my ear. And I'll go after them nicely, find their call, and I write them a note. And give them my telephone number. Call me. And they're usually shocked. Why? Because none of our headsets should not be really comfortable. But here's the deal. All of my headsets from day one have a piece of steel in that pad. And if, like me, it's a little pinhead. But if you have a bigger head, stretch it, bend it. You're not going to break it. Now, it'll take the tension off. You got a pinhead like me? Fine, make it go back together. And you can do that with any of them. And it's really sad that a lot of times guys don't know that. But when they do, they'll call me back or write me back and say, hey, thank you. It's now really comfortable. Yeah, it is. And fun stuff. Okay, gang. Well, this has been really fun from Benicia. I wish I could be with you. But if you see, well, you can't see Jim. He passed away. His son's still around, but his daughter's running the place. So see any of those characters out at Dunlop, tell them I said hello. Because they build the talk box there.
Thank you, Bob.
Well, thank you. So I'm going to go over here and fire up the big organ, see what's going to happen the rest of the day for me. I should get on the air. Route 66 is flying, but I got to do that. I'd rather do that for right now. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Be well. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bob.